Okay. Hey guys. It's Daniel here. So I'm going to be reviewing the Astral Codex 10, your book review, Progress and Poverty. So this Astral Codex, formerly known as Legis Codex, and so this book is really interesting. I haven't read the book, but I'm read the review, and this review is really good. I don't think it's written by him. It's written by some anonymous person, but hey, good job whoever wrote this. And I think it explains why so many rationalists want to tax land. They think this is going to be the most effective way of society economics, and there's a lot of good economic stuff. It's a little bit of a different economic perspective. It's called Georgism. He's calling it because a guy named George made it. But it's good stuff, and we'll go over it, and you'll like it if you like economics. If you don't like economics, just close the video now. So he's setting things up that there's so he's setting up like a problem, and then he's gonna go explain a bunch of stuff. Really, the later stuff is more interesting than the actual problem, but we'll start with that. So as it was expected that labor-saving inventions would tighten the toil and improve the conditions of the laborer. So industrialization should have freed us from work, because if you think about it, back in the day, everybody worked a lot. And then we got really efficient at it, and we still work a lot. So, what the hell, dudes? You were supposed to save me all this work, and I'm still working. And everybody's still working. Not everybody, but most people. So why is that? Why haven't we had less work done over the years instead of even though we've gotten more efficient at it? And he has a bunch of things. What's with industrial depressions? People want to work, but they can't work. And so he essentially says that it's progress itself. So that poverty and all its I don't know what that word means.
Concomitant.
A phenomenon that naturally accompanies or follows something. So poverty and its natural something shows themselves in communities just as they develop into conditions towards which material progress tends. Proves that the social difficulties existing, whether a certain stage of progress has been reached, do not arise from local circumstances, but in some way or another engendered by the progress itself. Namely that the resilience of all these poverty, oppression, and inequality is not something that we could fix. It's an inescapable consequence for socioeconomic system. So he's saying that progress itself is what causes a lot of these problems, and I think anyone who's familiar with a lot of leftist stuff will know that this is something that a lot of people think as well. So it's good to actually be able to look at this from a more critical economic lens versus just sort of general, our socioeconomic system is blah blah blah, whatever, right? How it is. You guys know culture war stuff. Okay, so he talks about the long depression, which is 18 whatever. I don't really care about any of this. Look, graphs are fun. This is all probably important stuff, but I'm mostly into the theory, not the empirical side, because I think the way I'm saying, I'm not saying the empiricism is wrong or information is bad. Obviously not, but it's one half the equation. But for me, the way I like to go about it is to understand what it is that they're trying to say, and then once I have that concept in mind, then look at the world and see, is this how it is? Because anyway, they're gonna provide you all these graphs and data and stuff, and good job, you should do that, and that's good and all that. But also huge selection bias, right? If somebody's hey, I have a theory, here's some cherry picked data, I don't really trust you. So I just want to understand what's going on first, and then we'll look and see we'll see if that's true or not. Well, I'm probably not going to do that, but you guys can do that. All right. So sloppy terminology is sloppy thinking. 100% wealth. 100% true. So he's defining all those terms at the beginning, which I really, really like. That being said, I think it's really important to point out at this point what you're doing, if you're defining all your terms now, what you've done is, what you are attempting to do is create a new paradigm, meaning like there's a new way to see the world. The way you see the world is wealth means this. He's going to talk about, but he's going to have a bunch of other like keywords that he's going to define. I like his definitions. I think they're great. But it is important to recognize that not everyone's going to be using the definitions, and they're not necessarily exactly like, because he's trying to be exact, and we're trying to like look at this from a more like a stronger like a more critical, not critical, but like scientific, like mechanistic view of things, and we're trying to like tightly define our terms so that we can see how they interact with each other, and we can see how that works. And again, that's great. But just it's important to note that that's what we're doing, and so we're creating like this new system, that way we can look at things. So it's like a new paradigm. It's a new way of seeing things, and it incorporates a lot of the old stuff. It's not going to be necessarily that crazy for people, but just know this, because he's going to make a move later, and we're going to have to talk about that. All right, so let's start with wealth. He defines this because he's going to need this later. And it's like I actually like the flow of this, so just kind of go with it and enjoy it. If you notice any mistakes, you can like write it down or like note it for later. But like in general, sorry, I got a baby in the room. All right, so by George, because the guy writing it is George, so he does by George all the time. By George, what is wealth? So wealth is produced when nature's bounty is touched by human labor, resulting in tangible product that is the object of human desire. Great, now we've just created 4 more words that we need to define, which is fine. But remember, this is a paradigm, and he's creating it. He's allowed to do kind of whatever he wants, and I think this is actually legit. Labor is required, amount doesn't matter. So he uses like the first basic example, which I love when explaining economic theories, when you use the most basic example possible. So picking a berry off a bush, the bush is nature's bounty. The human labor is the picking. Then the tangible product is the berry at the end. And then like that is the human desire, is because berries taste good and are healthy. And, you know, everyone desires berries, and you all know why. Or you don't know why, but it doesn't matter. So he's saying that labor, like the nature's bounty, the berry is there before, and then by picking it, you've transformed it from something that's just sitting on a bush and doesn't really have anything useful to something that is a tangible product. And now you have wealth. Now you are wealthier than you were before. So the value of so that's sorry, and speaking of desire, and then so human desire is value. So you value the berry because the berry is valuable, like it has value. And where does value come from? So there's this labor. So there's the labor theory of economics, which is you're measuring value, or you're measuring value. In this case, like the word, I'm going to use his words. So like when other people use different words and describe different phenomenon, and that's fine. But we're creating a paradigm here, so I'm going to use his stuff. That doesn't mean that other people's paradigms are incorrect. Just trying to keep things a little more simple. So we're just gonna we're just gonna move into his paradigm, and we're gonna buy it like piece at a time. So value is Adam Smith in Wealth of Nations. Value of any commodity is equal to the quantity of labor which enables them to purchase or command. Labor is therefore the real measurement of exchangeable values of all commodities. So Adam Smith, and this is like the basic capitalism thing, is how much something is worth is how many hours you can get people to do things for you in exchange for that. So for example, in the berry example, like, you can get like, maybe if you had a bunch of berries, you sell them at, let's say you have a package of berries, it's worth $10, you sell it for $10, you have $10, let's say, or $15, we're in Canada, minimum wage is 15, so if I sell my package of berries for $15, I now have $15, I can pay someone to do, I get 1 hour of unskilled labor from somebody, so I have $15 in my pocket, I can go around more or less, and I can get, and I would be like, hey, can you work for me for an hour, I'll give you $15, they're going to say yes, and that's how much it's worth. I'm overskipping a lot of things, obviously, but it's a lot more nuanced than that. Maybe it's $15 is going to buy me an hour of unskilled labor, and blah, 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 but it's, versus like someone like a doctor is going to charge a lot more. Maybe they're going to charge like $250 an hour, and then I'm going to have to sell, however many, what is that, like 20 times money, almost 20, or whatever, like 17 times the amount of berries, whatever it is, in order to get that 1 hour from them. So it's how much labor you have. Quantity, he says quantity, but it's really quantity times quality, whatever. Versus he compares to the Marx theory. I don't know when he does that, but he does that at some point, which is how much. It does that here, right? So nowadays, when people say labor theory of value, they're usually referring to Marx, which Marx says total necessary labor required to produce it, which means it's not how much a thing of value is not how much you can exchange labor for it, but how much labor it requires to produce it. But George goes the other way, and I think that is correct. I hate this idea that it's how much labor it requires to go into it, because technically this is a lens in a way you can see the world, and it's technically just a measuring system, right? Like you can measure things however you want, right? Like you can measure, like Lord wants to be a ruler, so you can measure things in how many lords it is, but usually we use things like feet or meters because it's more consistent, easier to exchange, it's easier to understand and exchange. And I'm gonna have to actually take some time to explain this. It's a measuring system that's less prone to mistakes, which is generally the reason why people prefer the metric system over the imperial system, because the metric system, 1 kilometer is 1,000 meters, and 1 meter is 1,000 millimeters, and 100 centimeters, and so it's very easy to convert along these massive scales, versus something like the imperial system, which is 1 foot is 12 inches, and then 1 mile is like some number of feet that I don't know. Full disclosure, I'm not American, so I don't actually need to know that. But it's like this crazy system that takes forever to, that takes a lot of effort in order to exchange, which means it's much easier to mess up the imperial system than it is the metric system, because it's much harder to convert across these different spaces. There is arguments that the imperial system is easier to use, because like an inch is like your thumb. Your thumb is an inch, so you can easily just kind of measure, you have handy measurement tools as part of you, and a foot is from your elbow to your wrists. Obviously these are not exact measurements because everybody's body is different, but there's sort of general things that around the regular human size, this is about what things are. So you kind of can estimate things a little bit then. You have a ruler handy all the time, but whatever, this is a debate, and people can debate which one is easier to use functionally, which one's less likely to make mistakes, and maybe there's some circumstances yes, some circumstances no. For us, even though we're in Canada, we use the metric system. We measure people in feet. Like, I don't know how many centimeters I am. I know how many feet I am. And that's because it's just easier. Like, everyone is generally maybe 4, but usually like 5 or 6 feet and some amount of inches. So it's actually just a lot easier to use in that situation. And the reason why I'm explaining this is because this is a lot of this economic stuff, and a lot of economic arguments, and I don't mean like in academic circles necessarily, but in, like, let's say the rationalist community, or just like everyday, or people trying to, activist circles, or people trying to actually understand what's going on and all this stuff. A lot of these theories are often, like, it's often technically true, but then the second you try to use it, everything becomes extremely complicated and incalculable. And I think this is the reason why I think this labor theory of value from Marx is more or less useless. Like, I think there are like select circumstances in which it's probably very useful, but like in general, if you're trying to, like, let's say macro level, like, understand like what kind of system should we use for understanding how society should function, you don't want to use how much labor a thing went into, because that number is good-heartable in ways, like, you can just blink and good-heart it. Like, it's not, and there's no way to protect yourself from it, really. Because how much labor it takes to produce it is, like, all of a sudden, like, if I'm getting paid on how much labor it takes, if the thing's values how much labor goes into it, all of a sudden, like, it took me 10 times longer than if I'm only getting paid on how much, let's say, people want it, which is, like, much more like the Adam Smith's version, which is, like, essentially, like, how much labor it can command is really much how much people want and how much they're willing to trade for it. And he uses labor as a base unit of currency because of lots of good reasons that I'm not going to get into right now. But it kind of, like, transcends a lot of stuff. Like, if you use currency, like, your calculations it gets all weird. But labor is kind of consistent over time and things. But again, certain dimensions, it doesn't make sense. Right? Like a doctor's labor versus a professional labor versus a unskilled labor. And I'm saying unskilled, I don't mean to, like, insult. Like, I've done a lot of unskilled labor, and that shit's hard, right? And I've done skilled labor, and it's, to a certain extent, skilled labor is much easier than unskilled labor in a lot of places. In a lot of places sometimes. So I don't mean to be insulting. It's just that this is sort of, there's a difference in terms of economic power between skilled and unskilled, not in terms of, like, judging people or anything like that. So George goes with the Adam Smith's version because, like, let's do that. But whether or not, even if you're the Marx person, it's fine, because these are just different ways of seeing things, and this is the one we're going to use for this. That doesn't mean that the other side is not useful ever, or in other situations. Labor is extension of human beings. It's possible to labor to no avail. Right, try punching a concrete wall. I've definitely done a lot of labor to no avail. And I've done things that are, like, virtually no labor that have had huge, like, outsized impacts, right? Like, we're talking, like, effective altruism frameworks. Like, if you're measuring things by how much labor is being put in, like, you're not going to be an effective anything. Alright, this doesn't really come up, I think, so much later, so it's fine, we can just move on. Production is labor applied to the production of wealth, productively. This is all human exertion that isn't punching a concrete wall rewards you for your efforts with something that fits the definition of wealth. Said wealth is a product of labor. Yeah, so he's saying production is production of wealth. So there's a thing, and then you produce wealth, right? So picking that berry is production. You've labored and you've produced this berry. And like, yeah, the obvious perspective is you just moved it from the plant into your hand. But I don't know if you've ever actually tried to eat a berry from a plant. It's actually a lot harder than you think it is. It is much easier to just pick it. So you actually have created it. And even one berry is not really a big deal. But if you have 10 berries or 100 berries, or you have a basket of berries, see, a little baby here, and I picked him up, and that was labor, and we produced wealth. So essentially, like, the quality of the stream beforehand, I love that we can use real life examples. The quality of the stream beforehand was such that I was trying to explain this, and there was a baby crying, and that decreased the production value, that decreased the user experience, that decreased even my experience of the stream. It was becoming unpleasant for me. And because I picked him up, put him on my lap, and now we're wealthier. So good for me. I'm a good economic creator. And this is this is like childcare, essentially, right? So he's gone from crying to not crying, and that's produced value. And look, he's like doing this, exploring the whatever. He's doing things that he's enjoying. So I am doing childcare at the same time that I'm doing this YouTube channel. So really, like, my production is 2 times as much because I'm very skilled. Okay, so wages. So whatever's received the result or reward of exertion is wages. So essentially, this is the wage, right? Like, I get a happy baby. The baby was there before. I didn't create the baby in this moment, but the happiness is my wage as a parent. So he's not making distinction between blue collar, white collar. So, like, let's say skilled, unskilled. Whether it's hourly pay or annual salary, he calls them both wages. Doesn't matter. We see them from boss, customer, to nature. If you do the work, get something from it, you receive wages. So these are just the basic definitions. So if you do something and you get something in return, that's wage. You get something from it, not necessarily in return, but you get something from it. That's wage. So I received the wage of happiness, or the happiness. Now I'm receiving the wage of trying to touch my microphone and make it less pleasant. But that is the circle of life, right? All right, so let's go back to wealth. What are examples of wealth? By George, gold is wealth. Teddy bears are wealth. So he does by George every time because this is actually the paradigm that we're in, is the paradigm like Georgism or by George paradigm. No, don't use the microphone. Maybe use the speaker. Whatever this is called. I think it's called a speaker. I don't know, it's just fancy. It came with the thing. I feel like a real streamer when I have it. So he has a bunch of things. Tesla Roasters, Candy Kings, young adult vampire romance novels, fish you've caught. So like a fish in a stream isn't necessarily wealth. That would be probably nature's bounty, but once you catch it, that becomes wealth because it's like something that you can do something with. Deer you've hunted, cool rocks. The value of those things may differ, but as long as they're tangible, originate in nature. Someone ever did a lick of work to make or acquire them, the human being somewhere desires them for any reason, they're wealth. So he's saying they got to be tangible, they got to orient in nature, they got someone did labor to make it or acquire, and someone desires them, like values them essentially. So that's those are the 4 criterion for wealth. So if something has those 4 criterion, then they're wealth. It's wealth. If a thing has those 4 criteria, then it's wealth. If they don't, then they're not. So counter examples: money isn't wealth. Or by George, money isn't wealth. Which I think there's a little bit of disagreement here. I'm gonna go into some edge cases and stuff, but let's do this first, and then I'll go and show you show you where I think some of the things. Just I'm gonna say things, caveats, and then we'll go back and do that. Articles of gold are wealth because they're tangible. So they're tangible, like gold is something physical. So money isn't wealth, but gold is, right? So gold is tangible. It's been taken from nature. Labor has been put into it, and it fulfills human desires. A lot of people value it. But paper currency, digital currency, and other things that are inherently valuable but merely represent value are not wealth. So he has the caveat that money technically is wealth in the sense that you have paper money, you could turn it into a paper airplane, and now you have a kid's toy. But he's saying that's not what we're talking about. When we say like money, we mean like this thing is, you have $100 bill, that's worth $100, but it's not worth $100 because of what you can do with the piece of paper. The physical, tangible that was taken from nature and had human labor upon it, and then it doesn't fill any real human desire, like that piece of paper. So it's not real wealth. It's not real wealth. Like the value there is not the most of the value there is not the value of wealth. It's the value of claims on wealth. So the $100 is valuable because you get a claim on wealth. So if you have $100 in your pocket, you get to claim $100 worth of value. So again, like we were saying, I wish there was a $15 bill. This would be a lot easier to break down. But you have $100 bill. This lets you. This gives you claim on $100 worth of labor, or you can exchange it for $100 worth of something else, and that's valuable. But it's valuable because of this sort of abstract concept that the $100 represents, not the physical property itself. Versus if you had $100 in gold, the gold itself is valuable, and you don't need a greater economic system for that to be valuable in and of itself. Gold is pretty, and people like it. And money is not really a thing. Money, people don't really like the money. They like the value of the money, which is stored within let's say the paper. It's not really paper, but the cotton currency or whatever. It's plastic now, I think. Anyway, I hate when they change things because it makes talking about makes all the colloquials a little bit harder. But also it's good for society. So it's the same thing for other things. So like $100 in your pocket, or $100 in your bank account, or $100 in cryptocurrency. Like these things are all. There's a way in which these things are all the same, and that way is what he's calling a claim on wealth, or a pointer to wealth. So again, you have $100 in your bank account, you have a $100 bill, or you have $100 in crypto. Technically, all these things are different. Like these are all if you just look at it from a physics perspective, these things are all extremely different. Well, whatever, you know what I mean. Or $100 in stocks. All these things they're just different. But there's something similar there's a similarity that they all have that gold doesn't have. And I'm using gold specifically as an example because the similarity that all these things have together that gold would also have. And that's not the thing I'm pointing to. I'm not pointing to the thing that gold has in common. I'm pointing to the thing that gold doesn't have in common. And by me, I mean George. And by George, I will point to this. So money is a pointer to wealth. Likewise, stocks and bonds and other financial instruments are not wealth. They're also just claims on wealth. A creditor's title to debt isn't wealth either. It's just a claim on the debtor's typically future wealth. So if you owe someone $100, someone's got an IOU. When they write out an IOU, they haven't created any wealth, even though you have, and they give it to you. You're not. If by George, you're not more wealthy. You just have no claims on wealth. You have no claim on wealth. And then we're going to go talk about a little controversy: slaves. And if you own a slave, you're not wealthy. That's not, by George, that's not wealth. That's merely the power of one class to appropriate the earnings of another class. Probably it's a little more complicated than that, but whatever. That's you get what I'm saying. Like when you're owning, like when you own an IOU, you don't own anything. You own this. You conceptually own, or you own the concept, or it's recognized that this thing in the future will come to you. But you can't, like, there's nothing you can actually do with that in and of itself. If you existed within a vacuum, gold would be useful. Money would not. Actually, what does he define it as? Yeah, money. So he's calling all these things money. So money would not be useful, but things that money buy are useful. So if you produce pot gold, fish, Lego bricks, whatever, you've increased the amount of wealth in the world, but if you produce IOUs, you haven't. Now, let's say that IOUs aren't valuable. They are, but they're only they are valuable, but they're not wealth. And then the sort of crux example that if you magically transport everyone to hypothetical Earth, with all, so he's saying, like, if you split it, what's he saying? Magically transport everyone over to hypothetical Earth 2, carrying over all of Earth's one's money and financial instruments, but none of Earth 1's tangible wealth. The value of IOUs was instantly evaporate. Yeah, that's true, because you can have 1 million IOUs, but if nobody has anything, it doesn't matter. What about digital goods? So digital goods are wealth. So I guess NFTs are in this like weird zone. I'd like to see how that finds out. So he's saying like this JPEG, this picture is making his article better, and I agree with that. And is it wealth? By George, this is wealth. Yeah, so NFTs would be interesting to see how he puts that in. I don't really want to speculate on that. Even though it's digital, it's physically encoded somewhere. Whatever. But this book I think was also written before digital stuff, so whatever. But also like whatever, like we get digital stuff. Like we have the idea of digital assets. I think NFTs are in this like weird like in between category or something. Or at least for me they're weird. Probably other people know how it is. But yeah, like if you own like a bunch of videos, let's say, like it's hard because we all like stream and stuff now, but let's say like back in the day when you purchase digital copies of things, so you own a digital copy of something, or Steam, right? Like, so I have Steam, I own a bunch of video games. That's wealth because I can go play those video games and they're awesome. Yeah. So I own it. So he's saying like there's a distinction here between so Steam. What happens with Steam is interesting because most of my games I don't actually like. I own it in the sense that there's a digital bit somewhere saying that I own it, but I don't have them on my computer because I have too many games and I don't have enough space. And my wife won't just let me buy like $1 million worth of disk space so that I can have all these games downloaded, because also it doesn't matter, right? Like functionally speaking, they're not even on the cloud. Like they don't exist. And then I decide, hey, I actually want to play this game. So I click on it and I download it, and then then they send the information to my computer, and then I'm able to play it. So really, I'm just buying. Like when I buy it, it's like some bit gets switched or something. It's like very, very, very abstract, and like technically speaking, when I'm not buying wealth, I'm buying, I guess, what he would call money. I don't know. This doesn't really fit into digital stuff so well. But then I download the game and now I have wealth. So it's like I don't know, giving me permission to create wealth. I don't know. It kind of falls apart for this stuff because, like, by his definition, I'm creating and destroying wealth all the time. Every time I download a new video game and play it, and then I'm like done with it, so I delete it. Like now I've just destroyed all this wealth. But like from my perspective, like as a functional, like pragmatically and functionally, like I have destroyed all this wealth in the sense that I have to, you know, some of the games are big and they'll take like 3 hours to download. So like I have destroyed like 3 hours worth of work, but it's like not, it's like 3 hours worth of labor, but it's not my labor, it's the computer labor. So it's like, I don't know, like technically you could make this work. Like I'm not saying you can't, like I don't think there's technically any internal contradictions here, but it becomes very, it becomes itself, like the theory itself becomes very money and not wealth. Like it's not, there's nothing value, like there's no value in knowing these distinctions, I don't think. But whatever, we're just sort of talking in general because he's trying to, I don't mean to distract, right? He's trying to explain why we have all this like inequality throughout the as a direct consequence of progression, which is actually problematic because if he's correct, we have to go through the theory, but if he's correct, then inequality and like human progression are at odds. Like this could be serious. Okay, so is there anything that's not wealth? By George, Bitcoin isn't wealth, just fancy financial instrument, a digital claim on wealth. Most crypto assets, a token on some blockchain that says you owe it. I want to say like the contrast is like your wallet might not be wealth, but crypto as the process of exchanging information is gotta be wealth. So like for example like phones, right? Like if I can call someone and I can exchange information, right? Maybe the information that I'm exchanging is not wealth, but that I can call someone up on the other side of the world is obviously wealth. Like that is useful, right? If we transfer to another universe and like there was someone else on the universe with a phone, my phone would be wealthy. My phone would make me wealthy. My phone is wealth. Like I can physically coordinate even without the need for allocating for assets and stuff. There's a whole other category of here of like information, which he doesn't go into. Like is information itself wealth? So like having like good ledgers and like a good banking system itself, even if there's no money in the banking system, but just like the fact that you can do like banking with other people is wealth, right? Like people will pay good money to be able to use a bank. Like that's huge. Like developing countries, non-developed countries, like countries can't really develop properly without a good banking system, and it goes into it later of capital allocation stuff. But I mean, this stuff gets complicated. I don't know if this is like meta, and I'm not really supposed to be doing this, but like, whatever. Like, it's gonna happen in 5 seconds anyway, so we might as well do it now. What about intellectual property? So, intellectual property, so copyrights, patents, trademarks, are all different forms of monopoly. The exclusive government granted legal right to do a particular thing. Exclusive right to do or produce a thing, valuable as it may be, is not the thing of itself. By George, monopoly is not wealth. So this would include like all the things that he said, but it would also include things like a doctorate or like I don't know what they call, like a doctor's called like an MD or something, right? Like so you have as like a doctor, so. What's his face? I believe is a doctor. Scott Alexander is a doctor, so he has a monopoly, not an exclusive monopoly. It's more like an oligarchical monopoly. But by George, it's a monopoly over the ability to practice medicine, and Hey, how's it going, buddy? You having fun? And now he wants to play. Okay. Everyone is just born barred from practicing medicine, and you get that right to join that monopoly if you graduate med school or whatever, however that works. And there are certain regulated acts, so there's certain things you can't do. I don't know about the States. I know Canada. I would assume it's similar. So in Canada, there's a certain amount of regulated health care acts that you can only get the privilege of doing if you become registered under that. They don't call it guilds; they call it universities, which is a terrible name. But essentially, you're joining if you join the monopoly. So, for example, you're not allowed to inject people with things unless you get that right by becoming a doctor or nurse, or like certain healthcare practitioners are able to do that. Therapy is another example. So you are not allowed to administer therapy in Canada, and I would assume also in the States and elsewhere, unless you are a registered healthcare practitioner with the rights to administer therapy. So that would be like psychologists, psychiatrists, etc. And those are forms of monopolies. So the right to produce something under a monopoly is not wealth, but it is a monopoly. And I like that he's defining this term. So by George, it's monopoly. I might forget to use by George, but I'm going to try to use it actually because it's really useful for staying in this paradigm without. So I can use the words. So I say by George, this is capital, meaning like by George it's capital, but not necessarily by, by other economic or other perspectives or other theories or other paradigms. All right, so something that big is wealth. C word, capital. So capital is wealth devoted to producing more wealth. That is a great definition of capital. And everyone is hopelessly confused about it. So Adam Smith, that part of a man's stock which he expects to afford him revenue is called capital. Stock, like... Adam Smith's, when he's referring to this, he's not referring to, stock. So, like, if you were... He loves blacksmith examples, so I guess I'll just use those. So if you have, like, you buy a bunch of metal and you're going to make nails, you bought a bunch of metal. So you took a bunch of money and you exchanged it for metal. Let's say, steel here. And so you have, like, $1 million in steel that you're going to turn into $2 million of nails. That's called stock. So, when it's metal... when it's just metal, nails are metal, but when it's, let's say, raw metal, it's stock, and when it's finished nails, it's stock, and then when it's sold, so you've taken the metal, you've turned it into nails, and now you've sold the nails. So now you don't have any nails, you don't have any metal, but you have money. That's that money coming into you is revenue. So until it becomes revenue, it's considered stock, and all that stuff is capital. The word capital as philologists, which I think are people that philo is usually love, but I think it means that people who like words, people who love words, I guess, or study words, something like that. Probably comes down to a certain time when wealth was estimating cattle amounts, income dependent amount of head he could keep for their increase. So like stock is stock. Yeah. That's cool. So what's your stock? Like you're like, how many cows do you have, right? So if you have 100 cows, then you're gonna make more cows quicker than if you have 10 cows. If you only have 1 cow, then it's gonna be really hard to, or I should say cattle, right? But if you have 100 cattle, then it's gonna be easier to reproduce than if you have only 1 cattle. Cat is cattle plural. whatever. But you get how it is. So all capital is wealth, but not all wealth is capital. So essentially, if you have capital, then that's wealth, right? Because that's something that people desire. But oh, wait a second, I think that's a mistake. If you have capital, yeah, then that's something. So if you have the money, or you have the metal, or you have the nails, all that is wealth. It doesn't matter what form it's in. Well, that's the thing. It doesn't matter what form it's in. But the problem is, if you have money as your capital, then that's not wealth. Right? Because there are a lot of businesses that they need to have a certain amount of cash on hand in order to do business. That's part of their thing. So if you have imagine like a grocery store. So you have a grocery store, let's say like you open up, or like a corner store. Grocery store is a bit hard to think about. But like you have a corner store, and so you buy a bunch of inventories, you buy a bunch of stock for you got chips, you got beer, whatever. Chips and beer, right? Like you got a little truck. I like smaller examples. They're easier to think about. So you have your truck. You sell chips and beer, and yum yum yum. If you have no, chips are beer is $1. Chips are $2, I guess here, and chips are $1. You also need to have change, right? Which itself, because. Probably people aren't going to have $1 or $2. They're probably going to have like $5 or $10 because, people mostly carry around bills. So, you're going to need some change on hand, which itself is technically. So if you have like coins on hand, you're really you're using them for their money, not for their physical characteristics. Then that should count as capital. So all capital is wealth, but it's not true because money is not. They said money is not. By George, money isn't wealth. So, whatever. All capital is wealth, but not wealth. Capital. I think this sentence is actually incorrect. All capital is wealth or money, but not all wealth is capital or money. Sorry, but not all capital or money. Sorry, all capital is wealth or money, but not all wealth or money is capital. That's really what the sentence should read. And I believe this is correct. So, not all. So what he means is that if you have a business, so you got a bunch of machinery that's working to produce stuff. So that's capital because that machine is worth something. And you're expecting a rate of return on it, and so that's wealth. And if the machine is on and working and it's actually producing stuff, then it's capital. But if it's off and it's not producing or it's just collecting dust, then that's not capital. That's just wealth. So essentially, if you own a working business, then that's capital. As soon as the business breaks down, that becomes wealth. Sorry. They're both wealth. If you own a business, that's wealth and capital. As soon as the business stops working, it ceases to be capital, but it's still wealth. But also that stuff is probably depreciate. I mean, it depends on the situation, so you should deal with that. George notes capital is often described as being stored up labor and endorses this view. But what it really means is capital is stored up production. Yeah, so you spend a lot of time to produce a machine that can produce machines. That's a store of value. So the microphone here, right? So this is a store of value because someone put a lot of time, they put a lot of work into it, and that's valuable. And I can use this to produce this. I can use the microphone to produce the video. And it's not literally the labor that's stored up into it. Obviously, there's not. I don't know what that would mean, the literal labor that's stored up the I don't know, the exothermic reactions of the human being or something concentrated heat. I don't know what that would even mean, non-metaphorically. But it's the wealth generated by it. But they put a lot of time and effort into it, and they created something that's valuable. And I love this microphone. I think it's great. And so, but I don't like it because, like, I mean, sometimes I imagine it as like I often look at the world as like, oh, people like made things, and it's like time, effort, and like what information and energies have gone into that to make these things. But it's really like most of the time I'm looking at the world like wealth, like what does this do for me? What is this? How does this benefit my life or those I love, or you know, my race, which is the human race, and yeah, like my people, you know, the human people. I like those guys. And girls and non-binaries. George insists that the owner's intentions to transform the wealth into capital. So I mean, like, yeah, like usually that's part of it, sort of to transform wealth into capital without having good intentions. If you buy an old factory to throw parties in for your hipster friends, it's just wealth. But if the minute you decide to put work in to make something useful or charge your hipster friends cover charge at the door, it becomes capital, right? That's exactly correct, right? Like if you're just having a party, that's wealth. But if you charge at the door, that's business. Or like, and everything then becomes capital. This is also like weird where it's like, now I'm using the microphone, so it's capital, but later I'm not going to use it, so it's wealth. So it does like this little like switcheroo thingy, and then you can like sort of aggregate it, and you can say, well, my business, even if it's at night and everything is off, like it's still capital because like it's investing, waiting for me for the inspiration, or I don't know, whatever. I'm not saying this is the great, this is like the greatest necessarily thing, but I don't know. It's still interesting to talk about. It's like ways of seeing things, and it's important to like not hurt yourself because like you could do this thing like if you're like it can become like a very like yes it is now it's not now it is now it's not like you know you don't want to do it. Kind of want to like like sort of like often squint to sort of like just get like the gestalt or like the general picture of it, but not to the extent that you're going to like make a mistake and then like it becomes problematic later. And this is a lot of stuff with the economic theories of things. When you get too detailed, when you use it pragmatically, it becomes very useful. Like when you're like, hey, I'm living in the world and I want to generate excess economic value so that I can exchange it in goods and services, or you know, get shit done. Then like this stuff actually becomes very useful. But when you kind of do it as like this, like it can become like a gotcha game and stuff. And just be careful with theories. They're very they have limits. So like don't put them above like reality and what's going on. Like common sense. But also sometimes do. I don't know. That wasn't very helpful. George therefore further insists that a laborer's daily bread and the clothes on their back do not count as capital because the person has to eat and wear clothes whether they work or not. Like this is true, but I've done like heavy labor and like I had to eat like 3 times the amount of food. And I had to get different clothes and things like that. But they also count, like they kind of count as both, right? Like you have to eat, but also if you're going to work, then you have to eat. So, I don't know. Laborers' tools and arguably their steel-toe boots can be advocated as capital because their purpose is labor, getting more wealth for wages, and laborers won't acquire use to maintain those things otherwise. So he's saying like what's the counterfactual for the job, and that counts as capital. Like, okay. I can get really complicated really fast, and I don't think it's important to get into. I don't think it's relevant to the general thing. Is more exclusion what excludes capital? Everything that I've included is either land or labor. This one is actually important because he's making distinctions. So if something is land or labor, which we haven't defined land yet, but labor, then it's not capital. And so that's fine. By George, this is what it means. this by George thing is pretty funny. Human exertion, labor by itself, can never be capital. The products of human labor become capital. So if you're doing work, so when I'm picking the berry, that can't be capital. I guess like the inertia of my hand is not capital. I don't know. I don't want to so my mind's going to all these like edge cases. Like, well, but or like too nuanced, like over the top. But the products human labor become capital when they're stored for the purpose of getting more wealth. So I pick a bunch of berries, and I turn that into berry wine. So I turn it into berry wine. So I put them in a big bucket and I start to ferment them. That's storing them up, and then I'm hoping that process, that the fermentation process will go correctly, and that at the end of it I'll have berry wine that'll be worth more than the berries that I put into it, or berry cider. I don't know what it's called. I think it's called berry wine, and yeah, that's gonna make me more wealthy. And so then that becomes capital. So I pick the berry. So when I go to pick the berry, that's labor. Once I pick the berry, so the berry starts as the nature's bounty. Then I pick it. It becomes a product of human labor, which is wages. Becomes wages. Then when I put it into the fermentation tank, it becomes capital. It becomes capital, and then it becomes capital, and then when it's done, it becomes wealth, which is like super confusing. But I think he has a reason for setting up this whole paradigm. But whatever, this is fun anyway, right? Like, you guys are having fun, like, breaking this stuff down. So, well, I'm having fun breaking it down. You're having fun listening. And, like, also you're breaking it down in your head. Like, you should be doing, as a companion to this video, you should be breaking down this to yourself and saying, does this make sense? Like, is this sensible? Not is it true? Well, also is it true, but this is true in the sense that... by George, it's true in the sense that, like, let's say this was like a Star Wars, right? Like, let's say this was Star Wars fan fiction, and we're like, hey, how does economics work in Star Wars? And like, we just did this whole thing. Like, this would be true in the sense that it's a fantasy that somebody made up. And by George, this is a fantasy that somebody made up, right? Like, this itself is not really wealth. It's much closer to money than it is wealth. Because you're just kind of making distinctions here. And, yeah, it's good shit. Like, I like doing this. It's fun. And it's good. Like, it's good to have perspective on this. Like, if you want to go through life, life's going to be a lot easier if you're able to sort of parse this stuff out. Not that you have to, but it's like, these are things I'm going to teach my kid because I think it's valuable. And I think people should learn this, and it's up to you if you want to do this or not. Labor is not capital, neither is labor by itself wealth. It produces wealth. If it ain't wealth, it ain't capital. Right, so that means that if I invest a bunch of money in as money, because the money itself is useful to my business, like having some cash flow or being able to pay my employees, things like that, that itself is not wealth. Wait a second, if it ain't wealth, it ain't capital. I don't think that's correct. Like, that's obviously not correct. But he means that labor is not capital. Labor is like the thing being done. So I used to do manual labor, and I break rocks. Like, fucking literally. Labor, so I put a lot of labor into breaking rocks, and that's like there's no like it's not capital in the sense that there's anything there. Like, while I was working, stuff was getting done, and while I wasn't working, things were like other people were working, but like there was nothing getting done on my part if I wasn't doing anything. Versus something capital would be something that was running. Like, they had some machines that would sometimes run even if I'm not around. Even if other people aren't around, they would just like set it running, and then they would come back. I don't think they did at that particular job, but I have been in other jobs where they let things run overnight. And that's capital, that's not wealth. Sometimes for the videos, we'll let it render. And so I'll let it render, and it might take like an hour or 20 minutes or whatever. And so I put a bunch of effort into making the video, and I do the editing. That's all labor. But then as it's rendering, that's just capital because I'm not putting in any effort. I don't think computers count as labor. That's probably capital. But again, that's like one of these like cases because like the computer's doing work, right? Like if you're mining, right? Like there's labor being put into that. It's just not your labor. So are you a capitalist or are you? Because it's capital, but then like it's labor. I don't know, whatever. Also, I think this book was written before digital stuff, so it's less, whatever. Yeah. So labor is not capital, but neither is labor by itself wealth. It produces wealth. So labor is not wealth; it makes wealth. So you cannot have something that is wealth and labor. Yeah, computers kind of mess this up, especially if like AI start to get rights and stuff. But like also you can own them. That's gonna. Oh, but he said like the slaves. If you own the slaves, you own the production, not the person themselves. So I guess if you own the computer, you own the production of the computer, but not the computer itself. I don't know. That's kind of weird. Let's not think about that. We can think about that later, but I don't think it affects like the overall thesis. So we can just leave it. That brings us to land. Okay, so this is the reason we got into it, and it's been like I don't know, like an hour or something. So, but this is the actual thing that we wanted to talk about. Land. By George, land is not wealth, and it's definitely not capital. The special uniqueness of land is George's entire shtick in the very core of the philosophy. So this is kind of what it comes down to. Is like he's creating all this stuff, all these definitions. I in general, I actually like those definitions. I'll probably use them in my regular life. But like I'm not going to correct people if they're by George wrong. Because like, no, like that's not how things should go. But, but yeah, let's see what he has to say. I actually haven't gotten this far in the article, so I'm also reading this for the first time. Oh no, I got a little bit further. Yeah, so the term land embraces, in short, all natural materials, forces, and opportunities. That means a field or a meadow is land, it's a mountain, but so are fish in the sea, clouds in the sky, veins of gold in the earth's crust, and the oil deep underground. So he's talking, when he says land, he means like natural resources, essentially, including land. These things aren't yet wealth, right? So again, the fish in the... By George, the fish in the river is not wealth until you catch it. Until you put the labor in of catching it. Until you both desire it and labor it. So land is not wealth. So he's talking natural resources. Okay, so this is a thing now. When everyone's talking about like increasing like land tax and stuff like that, really, they should be talking about increasing natural resource tax. And this is starting to make more sense. But I mean, how come? Look, land is tangible, comes from nature. Humans are always productively applying their labor to it, and it certainly seems capable of gratifying human desires. George sees this reasoning as understandable. It's this root mistake that leads to political economist astray. And because for George, land is nature itself. Come again? Land is the ultimate source for all wealth, but most usefully think of it as a generator, a completely separate entity from the wealth that human labor and desires draw from it. So yeah, Magic Gathering and Catan examples. So Magic Gathering, you have these. It's a card game, and the way it works is that you have like a bunch of spells or creatures and things in your hand that you want to play. Those cost a certain amount of mana, which is like mana. It's like magic energy. I don't really want to explain the whole game right now, but pretty much you have land. I'm just gonna simplify it, and if you Magic users out there, you know that there's a million exceptions to all the things, but I'm just gonna say the basics. So you have land cards, and that's how you tap it, which means you rotate it. Every turn you get to rotate it, and it produces one magical energy of the type that it is. So this is a forest, so it's green, so it produces green energy. So you turn it, and it produces, and then next turn you untap it, and then you can tap it again, and you get magic, and you don't get to keep magic from turn to turn. So the land itself produces fruits, and that fruits labor takes those fruits and turns it into wealth. So to use a non-magic example, you have a land, and on the land is a tree, and the tree has fruits, and then you pick the fruits, and that becomes wealth. Don't know why they really had to use a magic card example, but I actually like it. It's like very easy to understand if you like the game. Same thing with Settlers of Catan. So in Settlers of Catan, that's a little bit different. There's the land, and you build like a little house on the corners, or a settlement, and then every turn the dice are rolled, and each of these squares has a number on it, and if that number is rolled, then anyone who's on it anyone who's touching it produces that type. So this is a wheat field, so you put your little guy there. You put your little guy there before somebody rolls it. Let's say whatever number that is, I guess. Whatever, it produces it. You get it. You get it. The land produces wealth and stuff. So in modern times, George Grant lectured on an access spectrum over real estate for satellites the same status as land. It already applies to farmland, terrestrial land. We don't even speculate with attached status to sunlight because it's straight predicted solar power. Cool. I love when people predict things in the future, in the past. It's awesome. Even the lack of rain, which makes some part of the globe useless to man, may... come here, buddy. Okay, so there's lots of things. So there's lots of things that he's calling land that aren't land. So, like the sky is considered land now. So that's fun. And rivers and lakes and oceans are also considered land. And so it's just the air and outer space. All these things are land now. So that's fun to name it that. Yeah, because utilizing the sun's rays, right? So essentially it's not, because think about it, it's not like the land that the solar panels like, it's the sun that they like. There's just nowhere else to put it except for on the land. But yeah, like if you went it, like really like the airspace above it is also land, because if I built like a taller solar panels like over your land, that would still, that still counts as land. I think this is hilarious. But yeah, so essentially it's not really land he's talking about. It's like space. I don't know, or immovable matter. I don't know. I don't know what he like. There's probably a better word for this, but it's natural resources essentially. So like you say, nature, which is like, let's say natural resources exist within nature. So like the nature itself, yeah, that's fun. Okay, so land comes before everything humans do or make. It's a thing no human can make. Let's say that's true. I don't think that's necessarily specifically true, but we can say that. Because for sure, like when you get to asteroids and stuff, right? Like, yeah, no one can, I guess like asteroids, no one can make an asteroid, but they're gonna like move it around and things like that. It's gonna have different stuff. Okay, so what about, so then they go through this. So what about Netherlands? They've been making land for centuries, which is actually really cool. And that's something we should explore sometime. I really don't know that much about it though, but it is crazy shit that they make land. Yeah, so again, it doesn't mean dry land, but also seabed, ocean, sky, outer space. The new land is really an improvement to old land, in the sense that land was there, and the ocean was there. They just they didn't create new land. They just drained the old land, which I don't mean just as in to disregard those accomplishments, but just as in by George, it's just improvements to the land. So what is land not? So nothing that's freely supplied by nature can properly classified as capital. By George, land is not wealth, and since it's not wealth, it's not capital. All right, land is very special to Mr. George. It's never put in the same category as wealth, labor, whatever. Why is it important? Well, by George, if you treat the land the same way you would a bar of pig iron, man, pig iron is like the funniest thing. Pig iron, it's a quality of iron, which nowadays sucks, but in the olden days it was like good stuff. An hour of work, or like it's like it was considered at the time a high quality of iron. I don't know that it sucks, but it's like refining process and things like that, right? Like, guy has a bunch of pig iron. Be like, yeah, I got so much pig iron. I mean, maybe, but whatever. It's like not as exciting nowadays. Okay, so by George, if you treat land the same way you would these wealth, sorry. We haven't even used the term commodities at all, so I feel like I should avoid it. So if you use these wealths, if you treat land like you treat wealth, before you know it, you'll get poverty paradoxically advancing alongside progress, inexplicable bouts of industrial depression, literal genocides, and holocausts. So this is like essentially, and the rent being too damn high, which is like a thing we talk about a lot, and it's actually pretty good. But yeah, so this is literally like the thing, like this is like systemic oppression. This is the systemic oppression of capitalism. Like this is the problem that he's addressing. Like this is what he means by that. If you're those kind of people that you know what that terminology means, which is like a very specific terminology and like in woke culture. I've been doing a bunch of queer phenomenology and literature and stuff, and it's actually quite interesting. Like it's a different, like all that stuff, like all that woke stuff is like just a different paradigm than this. And so when they use the same words, like Adam Smith, when he uses capitalism, he means, well, I don't know if he uses capitalism, but like what he refers to it, like what would you refer to as capitalism when you're referring to Adam Smith? is not the thing of the systemic oppression necessarily. The capitalist society that we live in and the evilness of that. It's this thing that we're talking about. Hey, buddy, do you live in an evil capitalist world? Yes, you do. We have to exploit you to get views. Isn't that funny? Are you working really hard? Say hi to the camera. Work really hard. Yeah, look at that. We have to look at all the things we have to do for our capitalist overlords. All right, so this is the thing that he's kind of referring to. So it's like what he means by land, he really means by natural resources, or maybe naturally occurring resources or something, or nature in of itself, or space, space-time probably as well, and by all this stuff is like all the systemic oppression that exists within our society. So that would be cool if like those ideas kind of converge in this way, because I like this language a lot better. It's a lot easier for me to wrap my mind around like this kind of language where it's like, okay, these are what these things mean, and this is how it works mechanically, and these things go, versus like kind of like the vaguity. No, I'm saying it's vaguity because I legitimately think when you're saying the capitalist oppression, it's vaguity and people don't really know what they mean, and they don't know how it works, and they don't really know how to communicate that properly. Like communicate that in ways that are going to be like studyable, like and like workable. I do think a lot of that language does create divisiveness, which is another video. So the question George wants to answer is why, in spite of increasing productive power, do wages tend to minimum, or we give but a bare living? I mean, so I don't know that this is even necessarily true where there's a bare living, but like I do know what he means in the sense that like we're as much wealthier as a society today than we were I'm not gonna say 100 years ago because that's after George's time, but or is it? I don't actually know when this was written. Probably should have looked that up. But whatever, like 500 years ago, 1,000 years. Every other time in history, we're much wealthier now, but it doesn't seem like we're actually wealthier in many ways. The conventional wisdom of, and we have all this stuff going on. There is a lot of inequality and like poverty and stuff, and I think that is really if we could solve that problem, that would be really nice actually. The conventional wisdom of George's time is that wages are governed by a fixed ratio between the number of laborers and the number of capital devoted to employment, because the increase in number of laborers tends to naturally follow and overtake any increase of capital. So it doesn't matter how much capital we throw at working employees, it will just attract more workers, splitting it up. So although wages may temporarily wiggle in a little term, they'll always settle back to natural minimum. This is kind of true. Everyone knows this is true. If you go to school and you have a little snack, then you're gonna have a little snack. If you have a big snack, then everybody's gonna want some of that snack, and then you're gonna end up with at the beginning you'll have a lot, but then you're gonna have to start sharing it and stuff. And this is true because usually more people can do the job better than less people. Not always, but it does tend that way. I have one baby. But if I had tons and lots of resources, then I would probably have lots of more babies. Ew. Got a mess on you. Where did that go there? But also I get all the attention of one baby. But if I go out to party, I don't get all that attention. That attention gets divided among all the party goers. Which, nom nom nom. Nom nom nom. See how much fun I'm having with the baby. Imagine I can spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with the baby, all the time to me and none to anyone else, right? How much fun would I have? The answer is it does not increase in fun up to a certain point. And when I go to the party and I pass them around, it increases everyone's quality of life, right? My quality of life gets better because I get to have a break. He gets more variation, so he doesn't just have to look at my face every day. He gets to look at other people's faces and interact with them, and everyone's got different baby things that they do with babies, and so he gets a lot more diversity and entertainment, and they all get to play with the baby, and that's playing with babies is fun. As long as you don't have to do it at 4 a.m, because then that's less fun, right? Right? No, he's fine. He thinks it's fun to play at 4 a.m, which, to be honest, it is kind of fun at 4 a.m, but it does also does make the next day harder. Okay, so you're going to so what I said. Okay, so these are general trends, right? It's not obviously you got that wiggle, right? And that wiggle is most of your life. What you're gonna see is the wiggle, right? If you find a new source of wealth, you're gonna be very wealthy, even if that wealth isn't gonna necessarily concentrate in the next generations, because it's gonna wiggle out, it's gonna disperse outwards. So wages, instead of being drawn from capital, are reality drawn from the product of labor from which they're paid. This is true. So he goes through a bunch of stuff. I don't know that we have to go through all of it, but wages being drawn from capital are reality drawn from the product of labor that which are paid. Right. So if you're investing in something, and you've done a good job. And you've done a good job, then the workers don't get paid from the capital, they get paid from the labor. So you hire a worker for $1 an hour to make $2 an hour, and then you give them one and you take one. That's what you're supposed to do as capitalist. It can take a bit of time to get there, so you kind of have to float it, or it could take some sort of initial investment like machinery or etc. Or stock. So you have to kind of invest in it, and that's what capital is. So he pulls a Chesterton to make this point. During the time laborers earning wage, he is vesting capital to his employer, but in no time unless wages are paid before work is done, is the employer advancing capital to him. This is true. Well, I will say that unless wages paid before work is done, I think usually, not always, but I don't know that it's true that it usually is, but I think it is usually. Usually, like, the fruits of labor aren't received until after. I'm just talking from a business owner perspective. The fruits of labor aren't received until after. Usually you got to float your employees for a little bit. But what he's saying is, like, so essentially, like, if you're hiring someone to pick a bunch of berries, then then they go out, they pick berries, they fill the basket, they bring it back to you, then they go out, fill the right. So they're bringing you all these berries, and so now you have all this like wealth of berries, and then at the end of the day, they're like, hey, can I get my wages? And you're like, okay, so and then you give it to them out of the berries that you've created. The thing is that workers don't really want to be aren't paid in berries; they're paid in cash and money. It's usually in money, right? And you don't get money until like the berries then have to go to market or contracts filled or however it is that you guys are doing it. So really like you're floating them. So like he's doing this like weird thing because your workers are floating you the capital, because if you just measure it in terms of like, see, some of the language gets all weird because by George, wealth and money aren't the same thing, but like workers want money, they don't want wealth. Like even gold, like people don't want to get paid in gold. They want to get paid in cash and whatever. Yeah. They want to get paid in. Wait, I need to grab it tonight. Oh, do you like the dinosaur? I think he likes the dinosaur because the dinosaur has short arms and he has short arms. Because he's little. I forget nobody laughs at my jokes because I'm here and he doesn't understand things yet. So technically it's capital, but the guy's paying in money, which means it's not paid in capital. So he's got very confused. Like he's confused himself. But let's say if we're counting money as wealth, which by George we shouldn't, then yeah, it is. Although also maybe at the time business was done a little bit differently. Okay, because wages are generally paid in money and many operations of production are paid before the product is complete, or can be utilized as inferred that the wages are drawn from the pre-existing capital. Yeah, it is drawn from the pre-existing capital, but if you're measuring it in terms of like overall value, then it's not. But if you're measuring in terms of like you're tracking like the physical things that are going on, say the physical denominations, then it is. Oh, do you want to play in this? We got this like exo-saucer. So it's like he can stand, but he doesn't fall. So he keeps breaking the thing. But it's like meant to be broken, like he keeps pulling the pieces out. Get a little entertainment in the background. There are labor laws. But I don't think I have to worry about that because he's not really doing work. But the truth is, I don't know what theory of YouTube. This is the problem with all these different theories. Like YouTube has labor laws, right? So is he doing labor right now? And like, what labor is he doing, right? Like, let's say it is updating the quality of the show to have him on and doing these things because you guys probably like looking at him more than you like looking at me. But like he's doing labor for his own ends, and now am I exploiting this for views? Like, am I like an evil capitalist, or is this like a nice family human interaction, or is this a family business? Because I mean, not that I'm making any money off of these YouTube videos, but if I were, it would be such like, what am I spending that money on, right? Like, it's gonna be a lot of some of it's gonna, a chunk of it is gonna be for him for sure, and like paying bills and food and stuff like that, right? So yeah, like with all this economic theory, I still don't know what's going on here. Hey, how's it going? Oh. I like booping his nose, but like boop. But the problem is he like ducks and weaves and like very, because like his limbic system isn't like his balance isn't like like solid yet. So like I don't know if he's gonna like try to like get my finger with his eye and then just like poke himself in the eye. So it's like very I have to get him when he's stable. Not when he's no when he's all like floaty and stuff. Do you need more eye contact? I think you need eye contact, but it's hard for me to read stuff while I'm staring at you. Yeah. I do the thumb also, so that if he hits, he hits the fist, not poking in the eye. It's good stuff. It's always like little tricks you can get as parents. You have to like figure it out. A lot of labor putting in so that you can have capital, right? Like this knowledge itself counts as capital. Yeah, because that information is useful on any planet where I'm going to be interacting with kids. Even if all the IOUs are different. Like, even if like that bond of like, that recognized bond is parent-child relationship, if that that is recognized by society, and I have ownership over that. I don't know, maybe this is too extrapolate. We don't need to go there. But okay, so wages generally pay money. Yeah, so it's usually you're floating the stuff. So I mean, the old theory seems sensible. The employer has capital to pay wages. Besides, the capital investment get paid back by production when it takes a cut, which is how, if you're doing it right, that's how it should be. So does it even make a difference to talk about where wages are drawn from? Value goes out, value comes in. Isn't it all a wash? By George, it isn't. In the old theory, because capital must come first, it follows that industry is limited by capital. That capital must be accumulated before labor is employed, which leads to reductio absurdum. We're told capital is stored up accumulated labor, and that part of wealth which is saved for future production. If we substitute the word capital, it's different to the word. The proposition carries its own refutation. For labor cannot be employed till the results of labor are saved. It becomes too absurd for discussion. So if you can't do labor without capital, then like where does, I guess, the initial capital come from? Is what he's saying. But like that's not like totally true. First off, it's not totally true. And second off, like it's kind of true in the sense that like my body is capital, because like when it's not being used in labor. No, even when it is, like the actions itself are labor, but my body itself is capital, and that is an investment, right? Like somebody did invest into me, and those somebodies were my parents mostly, and they made it so now that I'm of this person and I'm able to produce labor and all that stuff, and now I'm doing that. I'm capitalizing the next generation, where I'm putting a lot of effort into it, and I joke around how he's like doing labor and stuff, like not jokes, but also serious, but also jokes. But it's really like this is investment technically, like what's going on. He's playing, he's learning, he's doing like the screeching now, as you guys can hear. This is like recent, like he wasn't really doing this a month ago, because this is him developing his. Well, he was kind of doing it a month ago, but he's been progressing. He's developing his vocalizations, and this is they're not really that helpful now. Like I try to talk to him, as you see, like we talk to each other, but it's really I can't really understand what he's saying. But he's practicing this, and he's practicing this, and that's an investment into his own capitalization, so that he can. Hopefully one day talk and things will be easier. He used to not be able to roll over. Like when he was born, he actually could roll over to the side, which is uncommon. But then when he got a little bit bigger, he wasn't able to roll anymore. And now he can. Like he can go from back to front to knees even now. Not for so long, but he's working on that, and he'll be able to stay on his knees for a while later. And like he's like, so he's building up his capital, essentially. But that requires labor, right? And the labor for me isn't like the investment for him is to do screechings, and is to stand, and is to go on his knees, and is to roll over. But for me, like that, there was investment of like we had to do tummy time, which is you put him on his tummy, when they call it tummy time, and that strengthens his core muscles. Now I don't do it because he just goes on his tummy if he wants, or goes on his back if he wants. So like we put that investment in, and now the rates of returns have paid off, where he can do a lot more stuff now, and so in a way he requires more work, but in a way he requires less work, less consistent investment, because I don't have to worry about. Back in the day, I had to like, okay, you're tummy for a certain amount of time, and then you're going on your back for a certain amount of time. And you know, like, you know what I mean? Like I had to keep doing that rotation. I don't do that anymore because he just does whatever he wants. Like he does it, he manages that himself. But I do have to do the standing thing. He can't really sit up yet by himself, but he's getting very close. And then when he does the sitting, I won't have to do sitting time. He'll just do it himself. This was a tangent, but not really, because it's capital is stored up, accumulated labor. So capital is stored up, accumulated labor. That part of wealth, which is saved to assist future production, right? So we stored it up, and that's in the form of knowledge and ability. And as long as he keeps practicing it, right? Like if he decides to sit and not do anything, then that will atrophy or since we're in this like labor theory stuff, we should say that will depreciate. But realistically, like he's gonna keep doing that. Like I can't get him to like, you see, like we don't do a lot of calm time. He's very adventure baby. So if we substitute capital by the definition word, the proposition carries no refutation for that labor. Yeah, whatever. But like he's saying, where does the first labor come from? Right, like because you have to have some capital, like taking, whether that's like taking time to think or storing up resources or whatever it is, like just all the, like we're all mini capitalists during the day, even those that hate capitalism, they're still like storing wealth for later and still investing in things, even if those things are your kids instead of means of production or something. And so I think this is fine. Like, where does the first thing come from? Like, how did the first microorganism come to exist with enough storage energy to do stuff? And like, it's a great question. And it's not really anything to do with with economics. It's a lot more like biology and stuff. And that I don't know how that. I actually have no idea how that works. I heard it was like lightning and lava in the underwater near a lava vent or something, but I don't know if that's true. But anyway, that digresses. So, but the point is, like, you don't, like, for this kind of stuff, like it is a reductio ad absurdum. Oh no, it fell. It is a reductio ad absurdum, and you don't need to do it because, like, as soon as you have body, like, if you find something now, like, let's say you dig and you find some gold or diamonds or an apple tree, like, now that's boom, like, now you have capital. So, like, capital is created just all the time, randomly, in small amounts. Laboring for wages. So they're just doing like the thing of specialization. So you you live in a fishing village, nobody cooperates, everybody does their own fishing, and then realizes that, hey, if I specialize, then we can maximize production. So someone gets good at bait, so then they become the baiter, the master baiter. You have someone who's good at canoes, so they become master canoer, etc. But the point of this, I think, is to show that production chain, which I love. Like Adam Smith did a really good job of that. Which he doesn't get enough. How's it going? Yes. I think he's gonna need more attention. We've been going for a while. I'm starting to lose my voice. But I'm coming off as sick. So for this example, he's showing a production chain. So if he has a pair of, if he's got some leather and he turns that into shoes, the shoes are the wages. So that's the reward of his exertion. Shows are not drawn from capital, either my capital or anyone else's capital, brought into existence by the labor of which they became wages. That's not exactly true because the leather itself is capital. And in obtaining the pair of shoes as my wages, my labor capital is not even momentarily less than 1 iota. As my labor goes on, the value is steadily added until when my labor results in finished shoes, I have capital plus the difference in value between material and the shoes. So he's saying that the shoes. This is the thing. He set up a whole bunch, like by George, he set up a whole bunch of definitions, and then doesn't follow them here. Because technically not. Like technically here, by his definition, the leather is capital, and then the shoes isn't capital unless you're doing a business where you need shoes for, which is not this business because you're able to make these shoes without those shoes. So they're not really capital. That's your wages. Yeah, like he doesn't follow his own definitions here. But the point is, the main point that he's trying to say is that the value is added. So if you have a piece of leather and then at the end of the day you have a good pair of shoes, all along the way, that value, and so let's say the leather is worth $1 and the shoe is worth $2. All along the way, that leather is never worth less than $1. It's always worth either $1, or when you start to work on it, it becomes worth more dollars up until $2 at the end. And it's going to go into this, and it's kind of dumb. Yeah, he's going to go into this later, but this is technically like this is true from a certain perspective, but also like if someone's if you're like a half-work project is not like it doesn't fit the definition of labor of it. Like it fits the value of like that Marx value of how much you put in, right? Like that would be like a nice, Marx would say, yeah, that's like a nice sort of, call it like a linear value, but like you can't, like, can you command labor with like half-finished shoes more than you could with the original leather? Right, like that very much depends. It very much depends on a lot of things. Namely, can someone else actually pick up the project where you left off? If they can easily do that, then yeah. But a lot of times when you're doing projects, what you've done is you've kind of like decreased the objective value of the thing, meaning that when you start a project and like, okay, you have you have this like nice piece of leather, but then you start cutting it, right? That's only valuable insofar as you're going to actually continue along with the project. If you just half finish the project, like that becomes, that's not necessarily useful. So, I don't know. Like you can't necessarily exchange that, is what I mean, for value. Because like it's not necessarily valuable to anyone else. It might be valuable to another like shoemonger, but like only if you guys are using like the same perspective, right? Because like even let's say I'm making a YouTube video, like if somebody else makes half the YouTube video, like I don't necessarily know where they're going, or are able to execute on their half of on my half of the video after their half thing, like especially if we didn't coordinate beforehand. Yeah, so it's like on one hand this is obviously true, but on the other hand it's like not necessarily true. So this is the thing, like this is where these things come apart. Like, yeah, you're extrapolating, like you're backwards extrapolating this stuff, but like you got to get rid of all the other definitions. Like this is isolated to the point where I don't know. I'd rather you just like lock that in stasis. You just say like the leather is worth $1, the shoe is worth $2, and in between is a Heisenberg uncertainty principle of value, meaning like I don't fucking know. It's really complicated. And it's different in every situation, and to calculate that out can often be worth more trouble than it is, but not always. Like, that's the real answer. Oh no, do you have enough standing? Do you need more attention? Attention, baby, baby, attention! You fly through the air. He loves to fly. Do you love flying? Is flying your favorite? You can be a pilot when you grow up. I hope like piloting becomes like a thing where like everyone can do it, like much easier. So like when he grows up he could be a pilot, but not necessarily like professional. But maybe if you want. I think you just want to fly. Maybe you'll. Yeah. That's good baby humor. This month they like to get eaten. I don't know why. It's very weird. But maybe it's like scary. Maybe that's like I need more food for him. Alright. Maybe that's like evolutionary stuff. You want a rock? Just rock. It's gonna hold for your hands. Okay, let's continue. So if a man were to hire, if I hired a man to gather eggs, pick berries, make shoes, and then pay him from that, there can be no question the source of wages is the labor for which they themselves are paid. This is correct, right? And yeah, like this is what I'm saying. Like it is true. Everyone knows this is true. Otherwise, like you're paying them out of. You're physically paying them out of the capital, but you're from a wealth perspective. See, he doesn't have like this definition of like fungible wealthness, and like that's the thing that you really want, that you're really measuring, and this is like modern economic theory. What?
Can I take him over there and see if I'm going down for now?
Sure. That's some good labor right there. There's no like nowadays we'd have nowadays we'd have like I forgot what the term is, but you're essentially tracking assets and stuff. So like when you're tracking how much a company is worth, you add up all the stuff that's there. So you add up all the assets, you'll add up all the cash, and you add up like all the contracts. Even like contracts can be worth something, which contracts is just saying like I will sell you this much of object for this amount of money, or maybe it's like a trade contract or something. But like technically that could be worth a lot of money, because if you have $1 million contract, like you have the potential to make $1 million. But if I got like $1 million military contract, that's not actually worth anything to me, because like I don't know how to make guns and stuff. But there are certain contracts that would be worth something to me, and that could be worth potentially a lot of money. But even if I had that contract, like if I'm contracted, like let's say the U.S. government comes to me and says, hey, we love guns. Can you make us like 100 guns, and we'll buy them for, let's say assault rifles, and we'll buy them for $5,000 a piece, which I think is way above market value. So if they did that to me, I could do that, because I'll just go to like I'll just sell the contract, right? I'll go to Browning or I'll go to Smith and Wesson or whatever, any of those companies, and I'll be like, guys, I got this like crazy contract. I don't know why they gave it to me, but I'm willing to sell it to you guys. How much will you pay for it? And so 100 guns, whatever. Let's say they're going to be dealing with me, even though I'm small fry. So 100 guns, 5,000 piece. That's you have the potential to make $500,000. Actually, $500,000 is a lot of money. You have the potential to make $500,000, right? But that's obviously not. It's $500,000 minus production costs. So they're going to look at their stuff. They're going to say how much it's going to cost us to make the guns, and then minus that from the $500,000, and then that's how much money they could potentially make from that contract. And so I'm going to say, okay, so it's $500,000. We'll start the bidding at, I don't know how much we should start at. So I'll just start it at wherever people want to start it, and then they'll just bid off each other, and then they'll say, okay, someone will buy the contract. They'll say, $500,000, and it will cost me $300,000 to make, so I'll pay you $100,000. So then he makes $100,000, I make $100,000, everybody's happy, and we all go home. And then the U.S. Military gets their money. So contracts themselves could be worth stuff as well. Right, but if like a half-finished gun, right, it's not like that's not worth. Like, is that worth more than the sum of the part, like the raw materials? Only if you can finish it. If you can't finish it, it's scrap metal, which might be worth less than like just having like those sheets of metal or bars or however it's coming. All right. Yeah. So it doesn't matter. Whatever. Yeah, so he goes into all these things. So with guarding wages, the employer always gets paid first because the labor produces value, and then the employer's capital increases, and then they pay out from them. This is like technically true in ways that are like let's say if, instead of employer, we say business. So you work for a business, you acquire something that goes into the business then pays you. So you're always fronting the business in terms of value production, but you're not always. But it has to get exchanged, and this is the big thing businesses do, is that they don't just produce value. They have to produce value in order to exist, but like the main thing of the business, like from the businessman's perspective, like the entrepreneur, is that they're exchanging value. So they're taking things that are valuable in one medium, and then they're exchanging it into things that are valuable in other mediums. So when you're paying the employees, you're taking money which is valuable in all mediums, and you're exchanging it for labor that is only valuable in this specific scenario, right? So when I broke rocks, like breaking rocks itself is not necessarily valuable, right? Like when I was a kid, I smashed rocks for fun, and nobody paid me for that, and people told me to stop. But when I was doing it at the job, like the guy knew he had set things up in such a way that my breaking the rocks here in this time would produce value. And and he paid me like real money to do that. And like that's not something I can do actually. Like I don't know how to, like if somebody's like, hey, I'll work for you, I'll break rocks for you half off, like I wouldn't even know how to make money off of that. And so that's what they're doing. But he had things set up, like, and this is like good business owners should do this. You have things set up in a way that you don't just, okay, smash, like I'll pay you to do stuff now and I'll figure out how to do it later. You generally know how you're going to make money off of things before you pay people to do it. Not 100% true, like you sometimes heuristics and things, but yeah, like you generally mostly know how you're going to do it. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, and the exception is, he's saying there's an exception here if you have a business that is just bad at stuff, so you pay $500 an hour to break vases. So you're essentially paying someone to produce something that's worth less than the capital put into it. This isn't a real counterexample because this is very temporary. Because with one exception, which he doesn't go into here, but if you're doing a business that doesn't create value and actually destroys value, you're not gonna you can invest capital into it, and in that case, the worker is getting paid from the capital, but you're not gonna last very long because your capital is gonna run out. The only exception to this, obviously, is government, whose capital never runs out because they can just print more, and they own a certain percentage of production from their laborers. So government is actually like the ultimate like capitalist in this sense, where like they own, you have income tax, which means they own. We don't call it slavery, but they own, they don't own us. They own a certain percent. They're able to garnish our wages. They're able to garnish the wages of any corporation that exists. They're able to garnish a percentage of the exchange of goods and services, like sales tax, and anything coming into the country. Those are tariffs, and probably a bunch of other stuff that I'm just don't know about. Government's very good at this stuff. Yeah, so they're kind of like these like ultimate people in that they can just keep doing it. So if they do something, like there are certain government programs that I'm not going to mention that are net negative in value production, and those ones can actually keep going indefinitely because they just keep taking money from the population. So yeah. I have opinions. Yeah, so he's saying it's not the last blow more than the first blow that produces things. It's the valuation is continuous, which there is a perspective in which you can look at this as true, but it's like by George, it's very limited, and you can't look at it from the Marx. You can look at it from the Marx perspective. Like this works with the Marx perspectives, but it doesn't work with. It doesn't always work. It doesn't work consistently with the Adam Smith perspective. So George, capital can be required for certain kinds of work, but he disagrees with what that purpose is. It's not a pool of wages to get paid out of. It kind of is. It's not, though. Because what it is the capital is there. This is the thing that they don't really go into. The capital is there not as a pool of wages to get paid out of, in the sense that, and I know this is true because I do business, and when I'm investing in it, I'm not okay, I'm going to put a certain amount of capital in. That's not to pay the employees. That's to float the business. I want that money at the end of this. Right? Like when I'm putting in money into the business, that money's coming back out. It's temporarily they own it. And yeah, and I'm going to pay the employee out of it because I'm a good boss. I'm going to pay employee wages on time. And I do need them to do work. I do need them to do work before the value is going to come in. And as employees, they don't, their job isn't to float me, right? That's a misuse of power, right? I can't ask it because I want the profits and everything. But even in general, because it's my project, right? I can't ask someone to work for me for free. Unless unless there's a certain relationship that we built up or whatever. There are situations where I have people to do things for free, but it's within volunteer context, right? Where it's hey, you're here to volunteer, and then that's not for business. I'm not personally profiting, or it's because we do EA and stuff, right? So it's people in general are profiting. The world is better off. So then it's you're not working for me, you're working for the world. I'm just organizing this now, right? So in EA context, I'm not an entrepreneur, I'm an organizer. But in business perspective, I'm like, hey, I need some money because I need to like fund the shit that I want to do. And honestly, at this point, it's just easier to build a successful business than it is to figure out how to do their grant writing processes, which is an interesting incentive structure. But but for this, it's the capital is just there to float, right? So, or the capital is there required for certain kinds of work. So, like, I have this business now set up in such a way that I need to put in. I actually don't need to put in any capital. It's pretty funny, because I already have customers, and this is the way to get around it. But the way it looks is that the customers are hiring me for new things, so I'm gonna charge them. They give me money, then I take that money and I'm gonna give it to a bunch of other people to then make money for me, who will then give it. It's like a whole thing, but but I did put a lot of time and investment into it, and that time and investment I'm not going to be able to get back in the form of time. I put a lot of time and energy into it. I'm not going to be able to get the time back out because that's not how time works. But I am going to be able to get that energy out in the form of like, the system has a certain amount of energy, and then that energy goes there, and blah blah blah. And other people are going to be putting in more than they're going to be taking out. But from the energy, from the sum total of the energy of the business perspective, and so my business will gain more energy over time and more power. But from their perspective, they're doing an exchange, right? So mostly they're doing. There's kind of two people, like there's kind of two sides of this. There's customers and there's the workers, and the customers are putting in more time and they're getting back energy, and the workers are putting in. The customers are putting in money and they're getting back time, and the workers are putting in time and they're getting back money. And that exchange ratio is better for everyone involved than they could get anywhere else. Yeah, and that's why they're here. It's not really better for a lot of people. It's just the same. Like, it's whatever. Like, it's industry standard for a lot of the workers. So, but I'm a nice guy, so like hang out with me, so it's like a little bit better. That's how I add that value. It's like, well, they're getting paid the same for the same work. They're doing the same work and they're getting paid the same amount, but they get to hang out with me, so it's better. So I'm the capital, essentially. I'm most of the capital of the business, and that's why the business is not even worth the price of registration if I'm not there. Like my business, that's the thing, is like I put in money to register it. It costs like $200 or $250 to register it. That's not, like, that's a half-finished pair of shoes. It's not worth anything to anyone else, but it's worth it to me because I can leverage that. Okay, so so it's not a pool to get wages out of, but it's, again, he did the wrong, he defined the wrong things. Like, he defined a lot of stuff, and that's nice, but it's like net worth, like, it's essentially like is what is referring to, but he didn't define net worth. Like, I don't know why you put all this effort to define all these words and then not the word that he actually needs. And so that's what it means, and that's why this is confusing, because they're not doing it. The net worth doesn't come from the capital. The net worth comes from the labor, and this has to be true. The capital is just there as a catalyst. Capital is always a catalyst. It's not what you draw value from. Right. Every investment is like this. You're putting in money, and that money gets used up, but the value doesn't get used up. The value stays in existence, and not even stays in existence. It actually grows, or alternatively, it stays the same, but other things grow, and it catalyzes other things, like, depending on your perspective. But usually, like the value has to grow. Yeah, it's drawn from production, not from capital, even though it's in the physical world it's drawn from production, but in this like mental creation, that the abstracted version of reality that we live in when we do business is, it's not from capital. It's not going to seem radical, but it's important to understand everything I'm saying to be radical and shocking. This is I don't think this. Probably some people was, labor was entirely dependent on it. Malthusian theory was overpopulation was accepted reason why the wages were low and workers were starving. Yeah. It's because capital is not there to make people's... Capital is not there to... Yeah, maybe this is a thing people don't understand. Capital is not there to be used as fuel. Capital is there as a catalyst. Like, you take that value gets abstracted, but the value still has to remain. It's just in different forms. And then, like, good capitalists are like formless, right? Like, they don't care what value the form is in when you're investing, because it just stays formless, it stays abstract until like one day that you need it. But as long as you have it down on paper, or like as long as it's known that it's yours and it's something that you can engage with or draw with it at some point in time in the future, it becomes valuable in and of itself. And if you have the documentations that are abstractly owning it, then you're able to buy, then you can fungitize that, and then you can do all kinds of crazy shit with that, right? And this is why NFTs really bug me, because like, is that what NFTs are, where it's like it's just that, or is NFTs a scam and like just like nothing? And I don't know, because like it's just that you own it, like that's all it is, but like that doesn't mean anything. Like, you own it, but you can't do anything with it. So what does that mean? Like, I don't know, like why is that, how is that fungible? Because other people will want it, but that's speculation. But everything is speculation. I don't know. NFTs are a real like it's a real like blind, like a real like inter-paradigmatic, it's a real like cross-paradigmatic idea. NFTs for me, it's like right at that line where I'm like, this is either genius or the dumbest thing ever, and I can't tell. And probably like both. Because you can sell like the right, it's like a baseball card, right? Like, so you can sell, like, no, it's not like a baseball card, but it's like, Shapiro has a video where it's like baseball cards in comparison to it. It's a good video, but like it's more than that. It's like if you sell off all the individual rights, like, okay, you have the right to replicate, you have the right to use, you have the right to license or whatever, like all the rights except for the right to, and then you're left with the one thing of like the right to ownership in this abstract sense, whatever that means. That's NFTs. I don't know. There's probably a system, like a paradigm, which this makes sense. But for me right now, it's very cross-paradigmatic. Yeah, I can't handle NFTs. I don't do anything with that, but I'm also like not shitting on people that do it either, because I don't know like actually what's going on. Okay, so Mr. George, you spent the last 3 chapters being over the head with the functionality capital aren't. What are the functions of capital? Capital. Increase the power of labor, produce wealth. Yeah, it's catalyst. Yeah, essentially. By enabling capital labor to apply itself more effectively, power tools go brr, right? Essentially, yeah, like I broke rocks. I did not break them with my hands. If I tried to do that, if someone tried to hire me to do that, I wouldn't have done that. But if I tried to do it, it wouldn't have worked. We did use power tools, that's correct. We also used non-power tools. Pickaxe, I think? Sledgehammer. But we used the, like, I forgot what it's called. It is super fun to use. Like, it's as fun as you think it is. But, like, only for, like, the first, like... it's demolition for a while. And it is super fun. Like, it is as fun as you think it is. But it gets really hard really fast, and yeah, the crowbar was my favorite. Like taking things apart real quickly and like effectively. Like at the end of the day, I would always take things apart, but they'd always be like nice. They wouldn't be like all smashed up. They would be like the frames. Like the guy I worked with would just like wail on things, and everything was like all splintered. And at the end, my stuff was all like like nice and neatly broken, like just like taken apart. I like doing that. I like taking things apart. You know, we took apart a house. It was super fun. I mean, it was also hard work and like not fun. But man, I ate so much food. Also, like I had to eat like so much food. I would pack like sandwiches of like half a loaf of bread worth of food, and I lost. I didn't like lose. I lost fat and put on a lot of muscle, and I was eating like way more than I normally did. Which was great at the time, but then you build up those habits, and afterwards, yeah. Okay, so by availing labor of the reproductive forces of nature, so cows make baby cows, yeah, essentially. So if you put you could put money into power tools, and power tools themselves aren't going to create any value, but when people use them, their labor is worth more. So it's labor applying itself more effectively. Labor to the reproductive forces of nature. So cows, if you leave them alone in the field, they'll make more cows by themselves. And by making possible division and specialization labor, you dig bait, I'll catch fish. And this is I guess all of these are business, but like this is what the last one is what I think of as like actual like business is that you're like, okay, you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this, and then when we put it all together, we'll have like a lot of stuff at the end. And technically speaking, the other two are, but like they're just like not as sexy to me. Like this is the real business. The other stuff is like much more like the second one is to me is much more investment, right? Like so, stock markets like this. So, like I'm not an investor, but if I have money, there's like places where I go where people are like, you know, like stock markets, where you just like put in the stock market, like S&P, and not individual stocks, like that's the whole thing of itself, but like just S&P 500 or S&Ps or whatever you're doing, right? You just put it in there and then it will just grow, and you don't need to do anything. It just does it itself. And then power tools stuff is like the most basic, where it's you're just buying the tools you need to get your job done. So like yeah, I had to buy like for that job I've had different jobs and I've had to buy different equipment for it, and for that one we had to get like steel toe boots, which dude like saved my feet. Like I wouldn't have feet if I didn't have those. And the guy I worked with did not have steel toe boots. I don't know how he still has feet, but he does. He was like very experienced, very interesting people you meet like doing these jobs. He's very like he's like skilled and strong in ways that just like are beyond normies' imaginations, but also like he's been to jail like 7 times, and he's like, oh, there's this guy, I wanted to fight him, but then I was like, oh, I'm gonna go to jail again, and I'm already on probation, and I'm like, why'd you fight him? And it's like some dumb reason, like I'm like, oh, he said something, and I was drinking, and I'm like this, like, oh, you're drinking? Like, do you get to fight? Yeah, I usually only fight when I'm drinking, because he's like a very good-natured guy. I actually liked him a lot. I wanted to do business with him, but he couldn't follow through on the business stuff. And like I was gonna go get capital, and we were gonna do a business, because he's like, oh, I could do this stuff. I'm like, okay, well, let's just do it. He's like, well, I need the equipment. I'm like, okay, so you have you get a contract for 10 grand. I'll invest the equipment in. At the end of the day, we'll have or whatever. It's like a whole thing. I think it was, or maybe the contract would have been 20 grand. I would put the equipment for 10, so I'll put in 10 now. We'll buy the equipment. We'll do the contract. Then you'll pay me. Then I'll take that money at the end, and then we'll have the equipment at the end, and then we'll just do a business. And we'll split everything 50-50. You'll do like the work and all this stuff, and I'll do more organizing and things like that. But then he didn't follow through. So we were gonna do the first one, and then the third one. These are interesting. Yeah, I'm much more a fan of the third one, but they're all good. They're all important. Like it's just privilege in the way I'm privileged in the third one because this is the thing I like to do, but they're all like I think equally important to the world. Capital is a force multiplier that supercharges the product of labor. It doesn't supply labor with raw materials. Nature does. Sure. Let's not nitpick that one. Nor does it provide for the maintenance of workers who eat bread by the sweat of their own brow. Yeah, but this is true in the abstract sense. See, that's the problem. Like, it doesn't provide maintenance for the workers and doesn't provide wages for the workers. It's true in the abstract way, but it's untrue in the pragmatic way. George says this is why capital isn't a limit on industry. Okay, George Grant Cardinal limits the form of industry, right? Like, you can't plow without a plow, milk without a cow. George also grants that the lack of specialized tools can greatly limit productivity. True, because you don't benefit of force multiplier effect capital. Aren't you contradicting yourself here? You spend all this time hammering the doctor of wages to prove capital doesn't limit industry. We just said the absence can limit both the form of production. Time to back by limited. But say that capital may limit the form of industry and the productive of industry is a very different thing from saying that the capital limits industry. This is like nitpicking. Like, I don't know, like, why are you setting things up that way? What does that mean, limit industry? For the dictum of the political economy, that capital limits industry means that capital limits the form of labor and productive for labor, but that it limits the exertion of labor. It's not that capital limits the form, but that it limits the exertion. Okay, so he's saying that because capital provides labor with material and maintenance, therefore if capital dries up, labor production must go down because workers will have nothing to work on or wear or do. It's limited by capital without literally metaphor starve for capital. But yeah, this is true. And this is actually really controversial. But yeah, you can this is true. He's looking at it from the industry side. So he's saying workers within industry can work within that industry even if there's no capital to work with. Even if there's not like capital to work with. And this is true. Like, when I was doing that job, we were limited by capital in the sense, like, we had a bunch of tools that we used and things like that. And if we didn't have those tools, we couldn't have done that job. But like, let's put that aside because those tools are like it's not really capital limited, right? Like, you do one job and you can afford the tools. We were like hauling rocks, and the guy should have just rented like a conveyor belt or something, because like we're going up and down the stairs with all these rocks, and like that's such a waste of time and money, right? Like, if he would have had a conveyor belt that like would have gone into the dump truck, then it would have just like we could have just loaded them, right? And that would have been so much quicker. But that would have required a certain amount of capital, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to get into that industry in that way, is because I was like looking at it and like, okay, well, like this guy's making a bunch of money, and I think we crunched some numbers, and he's making a lot of money off of our labor, which is fine, right? Like, it's no, that's his job, but like he wasn't doing it well, and like he wasn't doing it well, and I'm like there and working there, like not the first day, like it took me a couple of weeks to like figure out what's going on, but then I wound up working there for like a while, and I'm like talking to the owner. I'm like, why don't they do it like this? And he's like, oh, some people do that, but he just didn't. I'm like, why? This would be so much cheaper and faster. Like, you could just like do such a better job, which is very exciting for me. Like, I used to get frustrated when I was working for people that, and this is like a huge thing that I think is different. When you work for someone that's like in an industry, and they're like their boss, and they're not doing their job properly, right? So if you're the owner of the business, like you're the capital owner essentially, or you're managing the capital. It's like a VC would be the capital owner, and then a founder would be like the managing the capital. But in this case, like they're the same person. Like, this is your job. You need to do these things, and you need to do them right, and you need to do them well. And so I used to get super frustrated when I worked for people that didn't do these jobs right. And then, I don't know, like over the years, it's like I stopped caring. I stopped caring about the business because I don't give a shit. It's not my business. Right? It's someone else's business. I'm a worker. I'm there. I'm gonna do the best I can because this is my responsibility. Right? I gotta manage my own labor, and I'm gonna do the best I can. And I'm going to look out for my boss. They gave me a job, and I'm grateful. And I'm gonna, do whatever I can to help them, like within reason. But if they're not listening to me, I used to get frustrated and like feel all this and that and the other. But this is actually an opportunity. Like if that person's succeeding in business and they're doing a shitty job, like you should go out and compete with them. You got to be careful that you're right and they're not right, because it does happen. Like, oh, I'm working here for 2 hours and I'm right and everyone else is wrong. Like that does happen. But also sometimes you're right about that. And everyone who's like worked enough jobs knows this, and has like certain intelligence knows this. The problem with that industry though is that it's all connections. Like you can't get the contracts unless you're connected. That's the main thing. That's the thing that sucks, because then nobody can do a better job. And like getting started and stuff, because you have to learn the industry. And that's the thing. You have to have a passion for the industry if you're going to learn it. You should be working in industries that you have passion in about, even if you're working low-level jobs. And like all industries have low-level jobs. And low-paid or like entry jobs. Like those jobs are fine. I like to start off in, because those are also part of it. And to be honest, like a lot of the time like the entry level jobs are like pretty vital to the system, or you're at least like you're working with people that are vital, or at least like you get to learn about the system in ways. And those are essentials. So like I would say it's more like pick an industry that you're passionate about more than like if you're looking career like long term, pick an industry you're passionate about versus like a better job or something. Because even if your job isn't as good, but if you're like looking around and learning and things, a lot of the things like them messing up on those levels, it makes you happy, not sad. Because it's like, okay, well, these are the people I'm going to be competing with. Like, this should be easy. Yeah, like the more edges you can line up, the likelier you are of going to do well. But yeah, okay, so we'll have those secondary barrels. All right. Sorry. Okay, so limits productivity in real life, right? So you need capital to get any work done, and without capital, sustainable labor will shift up. Instead, capital is rock fuel to labor. Supplies itself by investing a portion of wages. This is true and it's not true. So you don't. Most things you need some capital, in the sense that like every business needs capital, but it's like the capital might be in, you might be able to just work your way through it. So the capital might be like, okay, I need runway. So a lot of startups, they measure things in runway, right? So like I guess this modern startup theory is you have a certain amount of runway within your business. So that means like how long can you go without being like, before you need to get a job, to quit and get a job. And you need that the revenue should, so first off you need that your labor is actually worth something, so that when you're doing the work you're actually building something of value. And then you need that the revenue has to come in before your runway runs out. And it's like it's like a dynamic thing where like maybe a little bit comes in that extends your runway, and but at the end of the day, like you need that's your kind of limit, like that's your capital investment. And the cool thing about like in this like startup world is that everybody has capital, in the sense that like everyone could put in some amount of work without getting any rate of return. Yeah, and then like if you get like an investment, right? So it's like you run way till you get like seed, and then that capital moves you over till A, till B, till C, and they've done this in such a way that like in the Silicon Valley where it's extended all the way out till like you could have a company like Twitter. I think is not profitable yet. I think Uber isn't profitable either. Where like these companies are worth, I don't know how much they're worth, but they're worth like billions of dollars, and like they're still not profitable, but they're worth that much because those the value is there. People evaluate it this high because they're like, yeah, this is how much it's worth, even though it hasn't hit that profitability yet, even though we're not able to extract that value yet. But we know when we are able to extract that value, it's going to be worth a lot. And you can look at like Google, for instance, right? Like, so Google is past the point where they extract that value, and there was a point, I think it was 2010 or 2015 or something. There's this like great interview with Paul Graham and I think it's someone from Google. I think it's Paul Graham. No, Peter Thiel. I always confuse Peter Thiel and Paul Graham. It was one of those two, and they were interviewing this the guy from Google, and Google had like billions of dollars like in cash, or $1 billion in cash, or whatever it was, and they couldn't spend it. Like they didn't know how to spend that money, so they have a business and they're just making like so much profit that like their profit exceeds their ability to at the time it exceeded their ability to reinvest. I actually think that would have been fine. Like I don't see why that's a problem. But apparently that like I don't know why they didn't just be like, you know what, we're right. And then he's like, oh, that means you have nothing to invest in. Like that means that you don't know what you're doing. Like there's no opportunities for you. This is like the limit of tech. Like so like Facebook, right? So Facebook has become Meta, and they did the metaverse, and they lost like what was it, like $27 billion or something, like in a week or something. I don't know. It was like something crazy, and yeah, because like there's all this value and the valuations there, but then it's kind of like speculation where they're saying like it's a cross between speculation and real life. Like there, like Facebook, it does obviously have value. Like I'm not a speculator, I'm not in this, but like it does like there is value there, but like how much value is there is I think is a lot of speculation. And you know, maybe it's accurate, maybe it's not. Like Tesla, the same thing. Tesla's people have been speculating on Elon Musk's stuff since he left PayPal, and you know, it's gone up every single time, and that doesn't mean that it's going to go up in the future, and I don't know what's going to happen, but what's my point? My point is that the capital becomes abstracted, and it's actually really hard to do this stuff. And that's why he's struggling, and that's why I keep getting lost in the in the esoteric. But George objects to getting a capital. I don't think that's true, but it's like functionally true. Like most industry, you could do something without capital. It's just not what you want to do. That's the thing. If people are like opening up their minds and like opening up the possibility space and willing to do things that it's not the thing that they want to do, and it's not glory, you can do it. Like YouTube, like you can make YouTube videos without, like you need a phone, and like that's it. Like you literally just need a phone, and like that amount of capital is so little. But you get all this other stuff, like I'm on OBS. OBS is actually free. I actually use only free software, but you can probably tell, like my production value is not high. And if my production value was higher, then I'd have more success and things like that. But also this and that and the other, it's not like my main thing in life. Kind of unfortunately, because I really love doing this, but I don't love doing all the stuff around it. But I could put in more work and then we'd get done. So too much capitalism does not mean too many capitalists. Yeah, so the real limitation is not want to capital, but want to proper distribution. This is 100% true. Like most industries, there is enough money in there. It's just not distributed properly. And too much capital does not mean too many capitalists, but too few capitalists. Misallocation of capital, we said, was scarce capital, but they're not the same thing at all. This is 100% true, right? If everybody is able to allocate, capitalists essentially people that can allocate are people that are allocating resources. And if everybody is able, the problem is especially with inequality and stuff, it's that the wealth isn't being allocated in a distributive way, right? Like that's kind of the definition of it. And when you're doing this stuff, it's like I was saying, that guy's not distributing the capital in a proper way, and I wasn't able to do it because I in that time there was things and stuff, and I didn't have access to that capital to be able to I kind of whatever. But the guy was saying that it's like a whole thing, because that's the thing. It's like you can get this, but then you can't get this, and then you get this, but you can't get this, and then you get this, but you can't get this, and you kind of need all those things together in order for it to be successful, value creation, and that's why business is so hard, is because you need, like for the fishing, you need the fisherman, you need the fishing pole, you need the bait, you need the canoe, you need the right time of day, you need all the so you need, it's not just capital, it's you need all those things, and you need to be able to access all those things, and you need to be able to to put all those things together in a way that's going to be productive. And you need error margins, because the person that's putting them all together, everybody forgets capitalists themselves are laborers. Their labor is capital allocation. It's like putting all the things together, and that's a real job. And that's who capitalizes, who fronts the capitalists, right, with their thing, right? And that's a lot of education systems are there for, and practicing, really you want to be practicing on small stuff, and so I found my time in EA to be very helpful, because there's a lot of organizing things and seeing how things work and seeing what motivates people and what people are willing to do, and limits of things, and that's a lot of you're practicing helping people all the time, and everyone's volunteering and working together, and yeah, it's good shit. Right, and so you kind of, so it's not just distribution, but it is distribution, but it's real limitation of the want capital, but proper distribution. That's a huge part of it, but it's more than that. It's everything has to come together. All right, you have a factory and you're missing one piece, you're missing the machinery, or you're missing an input, or you're missing customers, or you're missing laborers, or you're missing electricity, or you're missing a wrong location, or whatever. You just, one of those things is wrong, and the whole thing is fucked. The whole thing is dead. And that's hard. And I think that's why capitalists get paid so much money, good ones, right? The richest people in the world are either in America, Western countries, they're all capitalists. In I don't want to say Eastern countries, but in some countries they're all the dictators, right? So the richest people in the world are all dictators, people that have, they owned land, and then under that land was some crazy rich resource, oil or whatever, diamonds or whatever it was. Or in our countries, it's capitalists. It's people that are able to organize things, allocate resources in ways that create multiple times the amount that everybody puts in. And that is amazing. That is amazing. That is the thing that we want, because that's the thing that's in between nature's bounty and laborers' stuff. like these companies, like these rich companies, they're like the people that are really rich that have these companies, right? Like Elon Musk is such a good one, or Jeff Bezos, or Richard Branson, even though he's like not as cool anymore. Their whole thing is such that like they do access to our resources, but it's like nature, what they say, but it's not that much. Like it's mostly, although like Tesla is kind of doing that, but like it's mostly the stuff in between that. It's taking things from like Amazon is like taking things from one person and delivering it to another person. Like that's their job. Like their distribution network, and that's huge. Like that's huge. That enables all the things. And like there are bad things you can say about them and their wages and stuff, the way they treat their workers and things like that. But it's like they're putting a lot of things together all at once in ways that the net worth has been increased in a crazy way. And that's the kind of things that you want to do. And that's allocation, right? Like Amazon essentially is allocating resources, right? Like that's what they're doing is you go on there and you're like, hey, I want this resource, and you send this money, and then they take care of that whole money chain, and you get the thing. And like if you had to do that yourself, you would never do it. You would never do it. And Amazon does that really well. Okay, so population and subsidization. I think we're gonna stop here. This is a lot, but yeah, I think this is the basic stuff that he's doing. So he's gonna do like this overpopulation thing. I don't know, man. Oh, this is short. Yeah, we don't do Malthusian stuff. Like, so Malthusian is just like, it used to be in the old days that everybody thought that the population is how much the land can produce. So however much food the land can produce, that's what the population rises to. As we get more efficient, as we're able to produce more food, the population is growing, and as the land gets damaged through overuse, the population decreases. This is the Malthusian ideas. This is not really, like, it's technically accurate in that like the population isn't going to be able to exceed like the amount of food that you've grown to a certain extent, but it's like we don't do that anymore. Like we're past that. Like we could produce much more food and the population doesn't grow and other places doesn't. But yeah, so yeah, this is like a thing he's saying, so that a lot of these places, there's a lot of places where they did kill a lot of people because they thought this was true. But like the population is going to reach a certain point, so we need to like curb that so that we don't get like a population collapse, things like that. But it's like kind of bullshit. We don't really do that anymore. Laws of distribution. I can't do this anymore. This is too long for me. But I enjoyed. I'm glad you guys stayed. I don't know if you did, but see you later.